handsome, and a real mover. Motor Trend agrees, saying RX-7 provides an enormous amount of overall performance at a reasonable price. Now, RX-7 is even more reasonable. Factory-to-dealer incentives can save you hundreds. Offer ends soon, so move.
See Ganley Mazda, Parma, Policina Mazda, Ravenna, Brett Vincent Mazda, Willoughby Hills.
The lasting legacy of President Kennedy, this week at 6, only on News Center 8.
It was a time of hope and promise. A new generation hailed a young president and the challenges he offered the nation and the world.
I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation.
Americans were willing to try anything and ready to challenge the old ways. The stars were never brighter, and the promise of conquering ancient enemies was never better. Our goals were nothing less than the stars themselves.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
John F. Kennedy represented the best we had to offer. To the world, he was a spirited champion of political democracy and individual liberty.
There are some who say that communism is the wave of the future. Let them come to Berlin.
There was another side to the young president. The man who was never happier than when he could sail the waters off Cape Cod and watch his children as they played. And almost always, there was the ready smile, the dry wit, and the refusal to let his problems get in the way.
Mr. President, it's been a long time since we've had a definitive report on your health. How is your aching back?
Well, it depends on the weather, political and otherwise.
There's Mrs. Kennedy, and the crowd yells, and the President of the United States. Shaking hands now with the Dallas people, Governor and Mrs. Connolly. The presidential car moving out. The President and First Lady.
And then as the car got directly in front of us, well, a gunshot apparently from behind us hit the President inside of the temple.
The dream was shattered on November 22nd, 1963. Most Americans who are old enough remember where they were when they heard the news.
President Kennedy and Governor John Connolly have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas.
This was the beginning of 4 days of non-stop television coverage that would bring the nation to a standstill.
A crowd of hundreds has gathered, still unbelieving, still not quite fully able to comprehend exactly what has happened.
It's a sad and very tragic day in the history of the United States.
The whole world grieved, and it was just so senseless.
We didn't expect this sort of thing to be possible in the United States of America. Assassinations were something that happened in, the far corners of the world with uncivilized people.
The whole office staff, we went over to Arch Street. That's where the Catholic chapel is, downtown Boston. The street was mobbed. Everybody wanted to get in there and say a prayer for Jack Kennedy. I'll always remember the feeling of that particular day.
It was November 22nd, 1963, the day the nation cried.
The assassination of John F. Kennedy stunned the world. It had tremendous impact on millions of people, those who knew him and loved him, and many more who had never even seen him. And now, all these years have gone by, and something about the man who sailed these waters, President Kennedy, lingers in our memories. And it doesn't matter what gossip we hear about his private life, or whatever theory somebody has about who really killed him. The words he spoke and the dreams he invited us to share are as powerful today as they ever were. What is it about John Kennedy that makes his life and his death stay with us? To understand this, We have to remember what it was the American people and the world had come to know of him. And we have to recall the frightening suddenness in which he was gone.
When John F. Kennedy returns to Boston after World War II, he has it all. Money, good looks, the natural leadership abilities he had shown as a PT boat commander in the South Pacific. He has political ambitions too, and it doesn't take him long to do something about them. Kennedy wins a seat in Congress in 1946, then is elected to the U.S. Senate in 1952. He is bothered by a chronic back pain from a college football injury, but it never seems to slow him down.
We both came from somewhat the same background. We both came from large Irish Catholic families. So there was a lot of reasons why we should get to know each other and be friends.
Paul Red Fay met John Kennedy during the war and eventually became one of his closest friends. This means frequent visits to the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts.
This was home base for the family, and just the most wonderful atmosphere. I mean, all the vitality and the humor and all the children around, and a great experience for all of us. Everybody participated. Jack was playing touch football. All of us playing touch football. You could see him playing tennis. If it wasn't for his bad back, he'd have been a great tennis player. And even with his bad back, he was a very good golfer.
In 1953, Senator John Kennedy marries Jacqueline Bouvier. The wedding is a major social event and front-page news. It is just one more sign of his appeal, which other politicians are beginning to notice.
Jack Kennedy was an attractive, ambitious, a very articulate young politician in the House who obviously had his goal on something much higher.
In my judgment, the great questions of war and peace, of full employment, of economic growth, of a stronger society, of equal opportunity for all, will depend in the final analysis upon the President of the United States.
As the Democratic Party nominee in 1960, he is criticized for being Catholic, for not being old enough, for being a wealthy playboy trying to buy his way into the White House. Nevertheless, he beats Richard Nixon by a narrow margin to become the youngest president ever.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
At his inauguration to succeed Dwight D. Eisenhower, Kennedy and his speechwriters immediately set the tone for his presidential term.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
He cared about the quality and style of his speeches. He believed in old-fashioned rhetoric and eloquence. He wanted to sound a majestic note as he was being sworn in as President of the United States.
Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
This address is perhaps the first real indication of his power as a speaker, and it gives him a chance to outline what he calls his New Frontier program to get the country moving again. But the challenge for the new president is to get Congress to take him seriously.
The country was still pretty conservative. Congress was not willing to go along with very much significant change. You got to remember that if Eisenhower had been eligible for re-election, he would have beat John Kennedy 2-1.
Those odds often force Kennedy to settle for less than he wants, and later lead to claims that he is ineffective. During his first months in office, the programs he sends to Congress usually are the least controversial. But as it turns out, they're also some of his most significant.
I have today signed an executive order providing for the establishment of a Peace Corps on a temporary pilot basis. I'm also sending to Congress a message proposing authorization of a permanent Peace Corps.
Young Americans respond by the thousands, volunteering to go to the most remote regions of the world. They are paid no salaries. They have to live just as their hosts do, eating the same food, speaking the local language, and they love it. The president also knows that many Americans are worried about the nation's second-rate space program. His solution is to set a seemingly impossible goal, costing hundreds of millions of dollars.
I believe we should go to the moon. But I think every citizen of this country, as well as the members of the Congress, should consider the matter carefully in making their judgment, to which we've given attention over many weeks and months, because it is a heavy burden.
People had been really quite charmed by the audacity of the Kennedy promises when he stood there in 1961 in the well of the House and said, we'll have a man on the moon by 1970. Nobody knew how that could be done at that time. But the sheer challenge of doing it arrested us and put us to work and led us to give it the priority to perform that deed.
But neither these early successes nor the developing Kennedy style can smooth over controversies which often plunge the country into bitter debate. The pressures of unresolved domestic problems, poverty, joblessness, and racial injustice, the troubling advance of communism around the world, the threat of nuclear confrontation with the Soviet Union. These issues and more will test the president in a series of crises during his term. Another theme also begins to emerge now, a White House where the walls reverberate to the sounds of timeless melodies and the infectious laughter of children at play. There's every reason to believe John Kennedy is equal to the challenges, and that the music and laughter will go on forever.
Don't use plain petroleum jelly.
But my lips are really dry and cracked.
Use Blistex ointment. I've found it's better.
Isn't Blistex for cold sores?
Blistex also helps heal dry, cracked lips. Blistex has 3 forms of medication.
Hey, petroleum jelly doesn't.
Petroleum jelly coats, but Blistex penetrates for faster relief of dryness and stimulates healing. Only Blistex has this lip tip.
Penetrates, medicates, new lip tip. Blistex is better.
When Delta Airlines Steve Masutka found a wedding ring,
The person who lost a ring, please return to Delta's Gate B6.
I'll be standing over here. He knew someone had to be very unhappy.
Young man, are you the one who found my ring?
Yes, ma'am.
This means so much to me. How can I repay you?
It's just part of my job, ma'am.
Delta loves to fly and it shows.
'Twas the weeks before Christmas, and all through the theaters, audiences were shocked by a new holiday leader. Surprise! It's a story of reindeer and Santa in one wild trip. It's action, adventure, cheese balls, and bean dip. For this is a holiday comedy unlike any other. The only one with monsters and magic and Ernest.
Oh, brother.
So for fun and surprises outside the routine, it's Ernest Saves Christmas. Know what I mean? Rated PG. Now playing at a theater near you. Check newspaper for showtimes.
There's a duel going on at Taco Bell. The biggest appetites are shooting it out with our original taco for just 49 cents. All the tacos you want at a price you can handle. 49 cents each. All day, every day. When it comes to getting your fill for less, nobody beats the border. Taco Bell has a roar, make a ride for the border.
Together they would travel on a boat with billowed sail. Jackie kept a lookout perched on Puff's gigantic tail. Noble kings and princes would bow whenever they came. Pirate ships would lower their flags when Puff roared out his name. Oh,
one of the most enduring notions we have about John Kennedy's presidency can be summed up in one word: Camelot. In fact, it was Jacqueline Kennedy herself who first used the title of that popular Broadway musical to describe her husband's time in the White House. There was something about the legendary King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table that captured the essence of that brief shining moment.
I had breakfast with him the morning I left for India, and the New York Times had a profile of the new ambassador to India. And Kennedy got up and read every paper first thing in the morning. And his first question was, well, what'd you think of that story in the Times? I said, well, nice story. I liked it all right. I said, I don't see why they had to call me arrogant. He said, I don't see why not. Everybody else certainly does.
We met for the first time when he was already in office. Well, it was a special meeting with him because he was the embodiment of so much that so many of us felt, hoped for, had been looking for in the United States.
He was a very talented host and always had an interesting quip or two. And one that is most famous, of course, I happened to be at that dinner, was when he invited Nobel Prize winners. And when he stood up to make the initial toast, he looked around the room and said, the White House has never seen this much assorted talent in one room since Thomas Jefferson dined here alone.
John F. Kennedy always had a policy with guests, and that is, do not make court gestures out of entertainers. If you want them to entertain, then we must entertain too. We have to do something so that they don't feel they're singing for their supper.
There was a party celebrating the beginning of the second year of Kennedy's term in office, and we were fortunate enough to be included in it.
We sang at the gala, and we were sitting there with our mouths open. I mean, there were stars there. Carol Channing and Kirk Douglas and Joan Sutherland.
Lyndon,
Carol Channing remembers what happened when the president asked Gene Kelly and Lyndon Johnson to sing an old Irish ballad.
Lyndon sat there and said, I ain't gonna make an ass out of myself. And he said, Lyndon, come on up here. Well, that's the kind of evening it was. No, I ain't gonna do it. So then he said, come on, well, he dragged him up there. Come to find out, they both knew their lyrics of the Wearing of the Green, and the president didn't. You could hear him go, he was mouthing it, and he would go.
There were a couple of other songs. Then we sang, for the first time in my recollection, in public. Although we had been rehearsing it, Puff the Magic Dragon.
Puff the Magic Dragon lived by the sea and frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called Honolulu. Little Jack.
But there is another view of that time, that life in the Kennedy administration is anything but a fairy tale.
No one at the time thought of Kennedy's Washington as Camelot. He enjoyed the show and liked playing the music, but that anyone might do that. He would have regarded the whole idea of Camelot with great skepticism.
Perhaps that skepticism comes from Kennedy's daily battles with the realities of his office. He finds out early on just how trying the job can be. The president has to accept the blame when Fidel Castro wipes out an invasion by U.S.-sponsored Cuban exiles at the Bay of Pigs. When Freedom Riders take buses through the Deep South and are met by mobs of angry whites in several towns, Kennedy at first wants the rides stopped. He says the Freedom Riders are embarrassing him overseas. The president's first and only meeting with Soviet Chairman Nikita Khrushchev in Vienna is judged by many observers to be a disaster. They say the elder Russian gets the better of the inexperienced American. Kennedy is pressured to send more American military advisors to South Vietnam to help fight communist guerrillas. He does not want to commit combat troops, but he is concerned about seeming weak if he doesn't respond at all. The most serious challenge comes in October 1962, when the president learns the Russians are building missile sites in Cuba.
When the Cuban Missile Crisis came, Kennedy was, in human terms, ready for it.
To halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back.
You were proud of him, whether you were of his party or not of his party. Here's a man who was going to stand up to the Russians. And he made Khrushchev cave in. There's no question about it.
I remember saying after the missile crisis that his one reaction was to think that what kind of insanity it was when two people, him and another fellow sitting halfway across the world, could press a button and blow up the world.
Some say that it is useless to speak of peace, or world law, or world disarmament, and that it will be useless until the leaders of the Soviet Union adopt a more enlightened attitude. I hope they do. I believe we can help them do it.
The American University speech in June contained an announcement that the United States would not go back to atmospheric testing as long as others refrained. Less than a month later, Khrushchev made a speech in which he offered an atmospheric test ban, and there we were.
It will not reduce our need for arms, or allies, or programs of assistance to others. But it is an important first step, a step towards peace, a step towards reason, a step away from war.
Relations with the Russians were crucial, but black people at that particular time were more concerned about human rights for themselves, and we wanted action from the President of the United States.
The events in Birmingham and elsewhere have so increased the cries for equality that no city or state or legislative body can prudently choose to ignore them. I am therefore asking the Congress to enact legislation giving all Americans the right to be served in facilities which are open to the public: hotels, restaurants, theaters, retail stores, and similar establishments. This seems to me to be an elementary right. Its denial is an arbitrary indignity that no American in 1963 should have to endure, but many do.
It was not until we went to Birmingham that he began to respond to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The March on Washington really came out of Birmingham, and it was a coming together of several forces. So it was the point at which what started out a black Southern movement became a national, multi-racial movement.
In late August of 1963, 250,000 people march on Washington, D.C. Kennedy worries about the possibility of violence, but the crowds are peaceful, and the speeches make history.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
After that march, President Kennedy invited us to the White House to meet with him again that same day, August the 28th, and he was smiling. He thanked us all, and we had a glass of orange juice with him, and he said, "You did a great job. It was so impressive."
The test, I think, of John Kennedy and civil rights is that when he moved, I think he moved at the right time. Kennedy did, when the time came, meet the popular protest with the response that the civil rights movement had needed.
It is clear by the fall of 1963 that the tide is turning. The nuclear test ban treaty, the introduction of the Civil Rights Bill, the growing popularity of the Peace Corps, the spectacular success of the space program. The president has even told aides privately that he will pull U.S. forces out of Vietnam after the 1964 election. For now, however, he continues to send more soldiers, despite warnings that they will fall into political and military quicksand. But the administration can point with pride to its major achievements. And Kennedy can start to think about re-election next year.
When we left for Texas, he was looking forward to the 1964 campaign, that he felt he was going to win big. So he was eager. Texas was one of those states he was after.
The Kennedys' arrival in Dallas on Friday, November 22nd, is carried live on local television. Hundreds of people turn out at the Dallas airport to get a brief look at the President and First Lady.
There's Mrs. Kennedy, and the crowd yells, "And the President of the United States." And I can see his suntan all the way from here. Secret Service right along with the President, of course. The President passes right in front of a Dallas police officer, right in front of our cameras now. Somebody patted his shoulder. Mrs. Kennedy coming along behind him, grinning all the while. President saying, "Thank you very much. If I may be permitted to read a presidential lip movement." Mrs. Kennedy stepping in the car first. Now the President. They both in the back seat now. The President and First Lady. That motorcade will swing way around, go by the Continental Airlines maintenance hangar, head out for downtown Dallas, where thousands should already be on the street right now, waiting for a view of the President and his wife.
Also waiting is a man with a mail-order rifle.
The Duracell batteries we make now live longer than the ones from a few years back. Today's Duracell lasts up to 30% longer.
How can anyone offer me a computer solution without seeing my business first? That's why we're talking to MicroAge. Instead of trying to sell me something off the shelf, they're coming here to look at my computer needs firsthand.
MicroAge, as close as the telephone.
The new Remington Microscreen Ultimate with the exclusive beard lifter stretches the skin and lifts whiskers other shavers leave behind. The new Remington Microscreen Ultimate shaves as close as a blade and closer than any other electric shaver, or your money back.
Folks, for dentures that feel fresh as a morning breeze, try my Mint Fresh Polident. It's got a minty mouthwash ingredient, so it freshens up dentures as it cleans tough stains. Try Super Strength Polident Green, the mouth freshening clean. Ah.
Visit Scandinavian, where two people can now join for the price of one.
Isn't it time you got your act together?
Another 30 seconds of common sense.
Out test driving a Civic? Stop at your Hyundai dealer and compare. The Excel has over 80 standard features like quartz clock, graphic display panel, dual side mirrors, full wheel covers, even a remote trunk release. Civic doesn't. But Civic does have a higher sticker price and a lower resale value.
So you get burned at both ends?
Now, for a limited time, save up to $500 on a new Excel. See your Hyundai dealer today.
President Kennedy's stop in Dallas comes at the end of a two-day trip through Texas. Several friends and advisors tell Kennedy he should bypass Dallas, a Republican Party stronghold. Kennedy replies, a president of the United States cannot worry about what kind of reception he might get. And as the motorcade heads for downtown Dallas, these concerns melt away in the bright November sunshine.
I rode in the Secret Service car right behind them, and I was in the jump seat in line with the president and John Conley. And the crowds were tremendous.
Jim Wright, as a congressman from nearby Fort Worth, is uncertain how his neighbors in Dallas will react to JFK.
I just thought, well, this is an occasion when people really need to turn out for the President of the United States. There isn't but one, and they did.
Coming down from that short flight from Fort Worth to Dallas, I'm talking to the President, Jackie, in the back of the plane, and I said, Mr. President, you wave to the Texans on the right, and Jackie will wave to the ones on the left. And this is exactly what's happening when the first shot was fired.
My first instinctive thought was, somebody is trying to fire a 21-gun salute with a rifle. And I thought that was sort of inappropriate. They could have done better than that if they were going to fire a salute.
I had heard the noise, I'm looking at the president at the same time, and he had pulled his hand toward his throat, and he fell over toward Jackie. There's a second shot, and now Governor Connally is out of sight. The first two sort of came close together, but now we're riding and praying. And now we see the shot that hit the president in the head.
In the agonizing seconds that follow, Jacqueline Kennedy climbs over the back seat of the car. A Secret Service agent jumps on the car and holds her down as it speeds away. Within minutes, the limousine arrives at Parkland Hospital, where the president is taken to emergency surgery.
And then it's just a race, one doctor after another, and it was a tiny room. And I had a chair for Jackie outside of it, and every now and then she'd go in, and you know, some doctor or a nurse would take her out because there wasn't any room there.
As surgeons work desperately, Dallas station WFAA-TV interrupts its regular programming.
Find a zipper hidden in the arm.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You'll excuse the fact that I'm out of breath, but about 10 or 15 minutes ago, a tragic thing, from all indications at this point, has happened in the city of Dallas. Let me quote to you this. And you'll excuse me if I am out of breath. A bulletin. This is from the United Press, from Dallas. President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas. They were riding in an open automobile when the shots were fired. The president, his limp body carried in the arms of his wife, Jacqueline, has rushed to Parkland Hospital.
Program director Jay Watson and announcer Jerry Haynes saw the motorcade turn the corner just before the shootings.
Camera shots.
They grabbed the first eyewitnesses they could find and rushed them to WFAA studios several blocks away.
May I have your name, please, sir?
Bill Newman.
And this is Mrs. Newman?
Yes, sir.
And this is?
James Clayton.
James, and this is?
Billy.
Billy, tell me what you saw and what you felt. What happened to you?
We just come from Love Field after seeing the president and the first lady, and we were just in front of the triple underpass on Elm Street, and we're at the edge of the curve, getting ready to wave at the president.
We thought someone had thrown firecrackers or something against the president's car, and it just looked like a bad joke. Of course, as the motorcade came closer to us, we could see that it was not a joke. I remember the president throwing his hands up as if I thought to shield his face from something, debris or something from the firecrackers, which in reality it was a reaction to the gunshot that had hit him.
I walked over and looked over the banister there and saw across the street that you were down on the ground so that to keep out of the line of fire. What was the first thought that struck your mind?
Oh, I thought it was a firecracker, and I saw the blood, and I had the baby, and I just ran, and I got on top of him and laid on the grass.
I heard her scream, "Oh my God, they've shot Jack." And you know, at that time everything sort of happened so fast. We got down. I was terrified that, you know, we were going to be shot or my children were going to be hurt.
Reporters traveling with the president rushed to the hospital. Their first reports from Parkland are broadcast within minutes.
Congressman Jim Wright of Fort Worth said both Kennedy and Connally were seriously wounded but still alive. A call has been sent out from some of the top surgical specialists in Dallas, and a call also went out for a priest.
Maybe about 15 minutes later, a priest arrived, and when he went in to give the president the last rites of the church, Jackie went in again, and it was such a sad day.
I had viewed him with Mrs. Kennedy. It was a half hour before we authorized an announcement to the press and the world that he was dead, because we just couldn't cope with it. It was still disbelief.
We have this from Washington. Government sources now confirm that President Kennedy is dead. So that apparently is the final word, and an incredible event that I am sure no one except the assassin himself could have possibly imagined would occur on this day.
Now, everything else just stops. The nation is paralyzed by the news.
The nation's capital has learned of the president's death in stunned disbelief. Outside ABC studios, the sidewalk has been jammed with crowds following developments with shock and bewilderment on loudspeakers and TV screens. One can see the tragic news spreading from mouth to mouth on the streets. Here and there, people are crying, and there are reactions of rage and fury. At the White House, some of the staff was on hand as usual, though some were with the president. Crowds gathered here, too, and saw the lowering of the White House flag to half-mast when the death of the president was confirmed.
Moments after the gunfire, Dallas police converge on the Texas School Book Depository. Witnesses report seeing a man in a 6th-floor window holding what looked like a gun. Inside, police find a high-powered rifle equipped with a scope. And next to a 6th-floor window, empty rifle shells. One of the men who works in the building cannot be accounted for. His name is Lee Harvey Oswald.
May report this bulletin that a Secret Service agent and a Dallas policeman were shot and killed here today. They were shot some distance from the area where President Kennedy was assassinated. No other information immediately available from there.
Police rush to the Oak Cliff section of Dallas where patrolman J.D. Tippit has been murdered. No Secret Service agent has been hurt. But now comes a call from a nearby movie house that an armed man has taken refuge in the theater. While broadcasters wait for this story to develop, they continue to talk with eyewitnesses to the assassination.
A gentleman just walked in our studio that I am meeting for the first time as well as you. This is WFAA-TV in Dallas, Texas. May I have your name, please, sir?
My name is Abraham Zapruder.
Mr. Zapruder?
Zapruder, yes, sir.
Zapruder. And would you tell us your story, please, sir?
I got out and about a half hour earlier and get a good spot to shoot some pictures. And I found a spot, one of these concrete blocks that I have down near that park near the underpass. And I got on top there. There was another girl from my office. She was right behind me. And as I was shooting, as the president was coming down from Houston Street making his turn, it was about halfway down there, I had a shot. And he slumped to the side like this. Then I had another shot or two. I couldn't say whether it was one or two.
FBI agents take possession of Zapruder's film before he does this interview. They do not want it shown to the public before they study it in detail. At Parkland Hospital, Jacqueline Kennedy watches as the casket with her husband's body is placed in a waiting hearse.
We left the hospital and we carried the casket on Air Force One, you know, sort of forcing it in. They made a section of the back by removing some seats.
There is one last official act to take care of, and it happens only 2 hours after John F. Kennedy was mortally wounded. In the cramped surroundings of the president's plane, the torch is passed.
I've just received word that Lyndon Johnson has been sworn in as President of the United States. More background material on that in just a few moments from New York. I'll repeat. Lyndon Johnson is now President of the United States. He was sworn.
Moments later, Air Force One climbs into the Texas sky for John F. Kennedy's final trip home.
It's a little spread country. It's Glade potpourri in a spray. It's country wildflowers with a little bit of garden fruit and spice.
Introducing Glade Potpourri in a Spray.
It's a little spread country.
Glade captures potpourri in a spray, so you can enjoy the fragrances of fresh garden blossoms, spices, and fruits for any room in your home, anytime, instantly.
New Glade potpourri spray. It's a little spread country.
Liquid bleach, brightly colored clothes.
It's flattering. It doesn't matter. It's liquid chloride too. She's color pretty and white's bright too. Liquid chloride too.
We're real busy, lots of work. We're busy, busy, busy. We're real busy. 3 busy guys plumbing.
For clogs at their worst.
It's for you.
Liquid Plumber is the plumber to call first.
right now is a great time to see your Northern Ohio Dodge dealer.
You've got a right to save, so we're offering cash back on selected 89 vehicles in stock. Get $400 back on Daytona, $300 back on Shadow, or up to $500 back on rugged Dakota pickups. Cash back on quality vehicles is your right, and it's part of the new spirit going on at your Dodge dealer.
See your Northern Ohio Dodge dealers where the new spirit shows.
The new spirit of Dodge. The new spirit of Dodge.
Visionary.
We choose to go to the moon.
Leader.
And this nation will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
Statesman.
The people of this country are anxious to see a world in peace.
It is more than memory that binds Americans to John Kennedy. Join Virgil Dominic and discover why Kennedy's dreams have become a lasting living legacy, why we still heed the call to courage. A special report this week at 6 only on News Center 8. We're proud to be your news.
In the hours after the assassination, police and federal agents searched for an employee of the Texas School Book Depository. Police get their break when an armed man is spotted in a movie theater about an hour after President Kennedy was shot.
This information, Police Captain Pat Ganaway today said a suspect held in the assassination, the picture you just saw here, was an employee of the building where a rifle was found. Ganaway also said the suspect had visited Russia and was married to a Russian. This is not immediately confirmed. The suspect's citizenship is not known. Ganaway said the suspect was the same man who shot and killed a city policeman in the Oak Cliff section of the city. And if so, those are the pictures we just saw, correct?
We sure hope so.
It'll take several hours for police to question the suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald. His arrest is noted only briefly by millions of people who cannot believe what they've heard.
I opened the office and I had my staff out there. Anybody hear about Kennedy being shot? No. Let's call the Globe. So I called the Globe looking for Bob Healy, the political editor. And the girl on the switchboard said, "Is that you, Tip?" And I said, "Yes." She started to cry. She says, "He's dead. It's true." Oh, geez, the tears streamed down our eyes.
This is Jules Bergen reporting from Times Square. There is shock and indignation and most of all sadness at the death of President Kennedy here in the heart of Manhattan. A crowd of hundreds has gathered, still unbelieving, still not quite fully able to comprehend exactly what has happened. But there is sadness on their faces and there is disbelief. The flags here in Times Square have been lowered to half-mast. New York's theaters have announced they're closed tonight. There'll be no performances as long as the president lies in state. And even
My husband was still in his pajamas, and he still was not yet moving around, so we were both sitting on the bed, and he was sort of lying on the bed. And finally he said, "That's exactly what's going to happen to me. I don't expect to survive this revolution because our society is too sick."
Members of the Kennedy family, as you probably know, are gathering at the home of the president's family in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. The president's children, John and Caroline, are at the White House. It's not known whether they've been told of the loss of their father as yet. A late word here has it that Andrews Air Force Base officials said today that the president's body would be returned to Washington from Dallas at 6:05 Eastern Time tonight.
Dave Powers is one of several loyal Kennedy advisors who are on that flight from Dallas. They ride in the rear of the plane, but Jacqueline Kennedy sits next to the casket.
It was the longest ride of my life. I kept thinking that it didn't happen, and I had blood on my right sleeve coat and on the shirt, and all I'd have to do was look down and realize it wasn't a nightmare or a bad dream, that it had really happened.
The bronze casket carrying President Kennedy's body will be taken from here to Bethesda Naval Hospital. We're told that sometime tomorrow, President Kennedy's body will be taken to the White House for private ceremonies for the family. Then the plan called for President Kennedy's body to be taken to the Capitol Rotunda, for public viewing sometime Sunday. Secret Service escort now lifting the bronze casket off the truck, bringing it down onto the field of Andrews Air Force Base. A Navy honor guard alongside. casket is now being put into a gray Navy ambulance. Mrs. Kennedy is now coming down following the casket. With her, other members of the Kennedy family. The Attorney General can be seen.
There are hundreds of details to take care of. There is the transfer of power to the new president, the planning for a state funeral. But this is a time when most Americans simply want to reflect on what has happened. Isaac Stern agrees to play a scheduled concert in San Antonio, Texas, but only on one condition.
I'll play some Bach for violin alone, which is the cleanest and the most timeless music I know. And I would ask you for no applause. And I'll see you another time. I started to play. And there was dead silence, and I remember the orchestra just sitting there. And everybody holding their instruments, and I was playing. It was very hard for me to finish, because by that time tears were pouring down my face and the fiddle. And I finished. It was dead silence. I turned around. I walked out into a car to the airport, flew to New York.
Much of Saturday's coverage of the assassination is devoted to stories about the accused gunman. Reporters learn much about who he is and how he may have done it. But there's still the question of why.
When one man holds so much power and the people have put their faith in him, and some idiot comes out and shoots him, I can't understand what he gains by it.
Who would want to kill a dream? Who would have such a vested interest that they would strike at the heart of what we all believed in?
Here comes Oswald down the hall again.
Did you buy that rifle? Just as fast as you people have been given, but I emphatically deny these charges.
Oswald has hustled through a doorway.
Police traced the rifle found in the depository to Oswald. On the basis of this and other evidence, he is charged with the murders of both President Kennedy and Patrolman J.D. Tippit. Oswald remains in the Dallas City Jail until Sunday morning, when he is scheduled to be moved to the county jail, directly across the street from the assassination site.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
The assailant is a Dallas nightclub owner named Jack Ruby. Not much is known about him, but his aim is deadly. Oswald dies during surgery at Parkland Hospital 2 hours later. It is a baffling, disturbing development that only deepens the mystery of why a president was killed. In Washington, thousands joined the Kennedy family for 2 days of memorial services. Beginning Sunday morning, more than 250,000 people will file past the president's coffin in the Capitol Rotunda. The next day, the day of his son's 3rd birthday, the family and the nation say goodbye to John F. Kennedy.
When Delta Airlines Steve Masutka found a wedding ring,
The person who lost a ring, please return to Delta Gate B6.
I'll be standing over here. He knew someone had to be very unhappy.
Young man, are you the one who found my ring?
Yes, ma'am.
I
must mean so much to me. How can I repay you?
This is part of my job, ma'am.
How can anyone offer me a computer solution without seeing my business first? That's why we're talking to Microage. Instead of trying to sell me something off the shelf, they're coming here to look at my computer needs firsthand.
Microage, as close as the telephone.
For a cassette copy of The Day the Nation Cried, send 1995 to JFK Tape, Box 177, Mound, Minnesota 55364. Indicate VHS or Beta. You'll have it by Christmas. That's 1995 to JFK Tape, Box 177, Mound, Minnesota 55364.
In the new movie, The Land Before Time, Littlefoot, Sarah, Ducky, and Spike share an incredible journey. Along the way, they become best friends.
Now we'll always be together.
And now these lovable characters can be your child's friends too. With a pizza from Pizza Hut, a Land Before Time dinosaur is only 99 cents. So come to Pizza Hut. Your friends are waiting.
We'll always be together. Pizza Hut, make it great.
Why build your dream little by little when you can do it all at once? Ask us for an Ameritrust home equity loan.
Now that's service.
Ameritrust, service you can bank on.
The last thing I need is another surprise with my investments. So I got the Ameritrust CD, high yield guaranteed return. Now that's service.
Ameritrust, service you can bank on.
Opinions about John Kennedy and his presidency seem to fall into fairly predictable categories. Friends and admirers say there has never been a president who was as good at inspiring us or reminding us of what we owe to our nation and our world. Critics respond that there was too much style and hardly any substance. But there was something else about the Kennedy years that cannot be separated from his death.
I look back on my days with John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy as I guess the most exhilarating time of my life. And I think it's a great sadness when one thinks how violence, insensate violence, deprived our country of what they might have brought to it.
One of the saddest things about the tragic day in Dallas is what might have been. You know, today and tomorrow, we shall miss him. And we will never know for sure how different this world of ours might have been had fate enabled him to complete his agenda. I believe he was on a roll.
We really long for John F. Kennedy. The nation needs that. And somehow that spirit and that dedication is something that we must keep alive, and we must keep teaching and encouraging young people in that regard.
One of the most significant reminders we have today of John F. Kennedy's spirit is the Peace Corps. When thousands of returned volunteers celebrated the Peace Corps' 25th anniversary, it was his inspiration they honored as well.
In these days in Washington, you have reminded us again of these priceless ideals and enduring values. You've kept President Kennedy's dream alive, and I only wish you were here today to share the pride in your achievement.
If I were making a suggestion as to what should be remembered of Kennedy, I would have no doubt. It was the image that he conveyed of a government of the United States, which was a good, a benign, a constructive, and a compassionate influence.
What he should have taught us is that we can't spend our time waiting around for a savior. What we've got to do is do it ourselves. But that's a big if as to whether that legacy will last.
This week, when you buy 2 pairs of daily wear contact lenses at the incredible Eyeglass Factory, you get a pair of prescription eyeglasses free. 2 pairs of contact lenses, 1 pair of prescription eyeglasses for just $59.95.
Why buy one pair of eyeglasses somewhere else when you get 2 pair of prescription eyeglasses for just $69.95 at the Eyeglass Factory? That's right, $69.95, 2-for-1 eyeglasses at the Incredible Eyeglass Factory. This week at the Eyeglass Factory, it's the Incredible Bonus Sale. Call for details.
Ohio is Ford Truck Country, and this is the month that truck buyers have been waiting for. Truck Month, the best time to save on top Ford trucks. Now you can save over $900 on Aerostar and over $2,000 on Ranger, America's #1 selling compact pickup. Save over $3,000 on F-Series, America's #1 full-size, and over $2,700 on Bronco 2. Save big during Truck Month. See your Ford dealer. He's winning Ohio over.
After your Thanksgiving dinner, America, is it better to sit or to save? At the Zayre Nonstop Sale starting 8 a.m. Thanksgiving Day.
Looks like another hip operation for Myrtle, really.
So why sit around? Get a jump on your Christmas shopping and save on brand names, toys, gifts, and electronics at Zayre. Forget the dishes and clean up at Zayre. All day, all night, all weekend long. Starting 8 a.m. Thanksgiving Day. Be there.
Now, when you least expect it, it strikes again. Midnight Madness at Fredder Appliance. This Wednesday only to midnight with Ollie Fredder's stark raving prices.
Like this 13-inch color TV with remote, only $137. Or this VHS video recorder with wireless remote, just $187.
I almost paid more somewhere else.
The Midnight Madness sale at Fredder this Wednesday only to midnight.
Fredder prices are untouchable.
John Kennedy's legacy will probably always mean different things to different people. For those who remember, he represents a time of hope and expectation, a chance to dream of all that we can be. And he represents the resolve to work at making those dreams come true. A moment in November, frozen in our hearts and minds forever, may have taken away the man, but not his message. By looking back, we do not long for what can never be. And John Kennedy wouldn't want us to do that anyway. But only by remembering can we renew the enduring challenge he left to a land he loved.
How many roads must a man walk down before they call him a man? Must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? How many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer